Okay, and welcome to the Process Pros. Today I'm joined with Barry and Bree from the APAC office at Nintex, and we're going to be talking about change management and what that means to people and processes within organizations. So, Bree, a topic that's near and dear to your heart. What are you seeing out there in the great wide world around change management, especially with everything that's happened with COVID over the last couple of years?
Mm-hmm. So it's been really interesting in the last few events I've been to, and as a panelist or a speaker, the amount of change management actual initiatives that have been put into organizations to support the future of work, right? So I don't think I've ever seen so many organizations actually put and implement a proper change management team and people to actually own that. It's sort of always come under a project management office space or even HR. So yeah, definitely seeing a large uptake of change management strategies across the board, which is pretty exciting.
Nice. And what about you, Barry? What are you seeing out there in the great wide world?
Yeah, look, it is definitely really interesting. Look, in this session today, like what we're really talking about is people and their emotions and I guess what they go through when there's change in an organization or a workplace of any type. That could be related to some technology push, and obviously we love to talk about that. Um, but yeah, also, what's happened with not being in a physical office and the different ways in which people work with each other. And as Bree said, like that's been a driver for thinking about this a lot more, thinking about what people are experiencing, and putting in place policies and putting in place platforms and so on that allow people to keep feeling good about doing their jobs without having too many negative emotions. And that's really what we're sort of keen to talk to today, I guess, rather than more so about, Nintex products and very sort of specific things like that.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
that's our focus. And Bree and I have both historically worked in the delivery side. We've been in this position, and we've both been with Nintex for just less than a year, I think. Um, and obviously we work in a sales function now, but we understand what it's like to be out there on the other side as well. And for us, like having these kind of things thought about and done properly also helps us to, sell more technology and increase adoption. So we're very interested in that. We don't just walk away once we make a sale.
Now, so from many moons ago, dealing with change management boards, and often it was all about trying to come up with a solution that you could avoid having to go through change management, because it was seen as a pretty negative experience in a lot of cases where you would build something out and you'd be super pumped about it, and then you would hit change management and you would get blocked and blocked and blocked to the point where it was like, okay, we just need to rebuild this entire thing, or we need to revisit how we actually do this because we're not going to get access to this and this. And are you finding that attitudes have changed a lot over the last few years in terms of, one, with COVID especially, and the rapid change in how organizations had to work from home, where all of a sudden, instead of having 200-300 people in the office, they're now working from their desks, and you had to get approvals to ensure that people had ergonomic chairs, and they had to have their laptops at home, and did they have 2 monitors and all the peripheries that go with just getting set up at home. Do you feel that change management in particular was flexible enough, or had to be flexible enough, to be able to just push that stuff through, or did people just sort of bypass it just to get it done?
I would say, Barry, can I take that one?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Dan. Back in the day, change management was definitely an almost like a scary thing to embrace in an organization, because change is super disruptive, right? When we talk about change, but with the COVID impact in particular, I think organizations had this reality hit that actually, yeah, change is disruptive, but it is happening around us right now. So we actually need to put a strategy in place versus fight the, the change that's actually inevitable for any organization. And like, I think many of us have seen the meme of the wrecking ball coming into a boardroom. That's COVID, right? I think a lot of people had their heads in the sand. And realistically, though, from a digital point of view, if we do not have in this time and age a proper change management and enablement strategy for our workforce, we're just not going to have success as an organization, but we're also going to spend a lot more money actually just working around our people versus actually delivering value to our people and our customers and our organization, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think in general, we definitely have had to learn from the past. In my experience being in delivery, we used to hit those curveballs all the time. And when we got to enabling people with technology or anything new, even new hardware, rolling out from, say, a PC to a Mac was often a huge learning curve. And we'd just dump, a Mac on a salesperson and expect them to know how to use it. But that in this day and age, we just can't do that. We won't retain staff, we won't retain skills in an organization. So if we want to actually achieve a goal as an organization, we need to put good strategies in place to support people and actually realize that, change is here. We're right in the thick of it today.
Absolutely. So I'll stop asking, questions that are just sort of bubbling around in my head. And I know you guys sort of had a bit of a talk track that you wanted to walk through, and we've got some slides and stuff that you wanted to show and go through as well. So I'll let you guys sort of do your thing.
Okay, cool.
Great. Yeah. Cool. Just back on that last point as well. Obviously, COVID forced organizations to embark on change. It wasn't optional. If I was sitting on the fence thinking about some kind of, I don't know, digital or technology strategy, all of a sudden it was like, well, I have to do this. Because I'm not allowed to have people come to my office. And those examples that you gave, organizations had to very rapidly spin something up to ensure that people sitting at home were complying with requirements that they'd have around their health and their safety. So it was a driver really to very quickly embark on change, and that would have been quite shocking for some people. I think you also mentioned a few minutes ago, like, is it change considered to be a negative thing? Could we avoid that altogether? I'm not sure that we can. We've all been in this situation. We've all dealt with difficult people, and there are always those people. And you see that at all kinds of different levels as you engage. So if you say, well, I'm embarking on a huge strategy of change, like the kind of thing that might have like a program attached to it and a center of excellence, then people are going to go, oh, what's this? What does it mean for me? But even in a microcosm of that, like going into a workshop with some people and saying, look, something's happening. I've come in as a consultant and we're here to talk about some new technology. You'll also get those same people who suddenly experience a range of emotions. What is this going to mean for my job, my role, my future? So like Bree and I, we often talk about something called the change curve, and we have a really nice slide to that I love, and it comes in some different flavors. This slide, but it basically talks about what will happen as you embark on change, and I see this ultimately as being somewhat inevitable. Do you agree with that, Bree? That you're going to go through these emotions regardless of how much procedure you have in place and how much communication you have. There's still going to be people who experience this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the reality is we're trying to reduce the change curve by being open in this day and age, in the sort of modern world that we're in. By being open about change in these types of diagrams, it makes it less taboo to talk about as well, because we're accepting that actually change is quite human in terms of the impact to people. And there's a few, I love this particular slide but there's a few points that I think when we look at it from a digital point of view in particular, when we start in that current stability phase, there's also often a bit of an excitement phase that happens just before we dip into the change curve. Often, like in my experience, whether I've been a participant in change with a digital disruption or whatever it is, there's this point where we find something new and shiny, often something that's automated, great technology. It's an exciting initiative. And then the reality sits in once we start to actually implement the change or the technology, whatever it is. And there is definitely, we may go through some of these emotions through that change curve, but it's about catching those moments and being able to actually offer support to those that are going through some of the more negative ones there. In particular, I think in terms of the denial space and anger space, that's often when someone's quite threatened and don't know where their role sits in the future of the change, in terms of we haven't actually communicated and mapped that their role is potentially growing into something a little different, but giving them more space to work with customers or to achieve something great for the organization to actually, achieve better results. So it comes down to that communication lens. Yeah. What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, I obviously completely agree. I have seen all of this happen many times, as I say, at a macro and a much sort of smaller level as well. So if you're doing a big program of change, these emotions apply to that, but they also apply to individual streams of activity there and individual people. And a lot of that, is about not having the messaging from executive sponsor level about why are we here? Or it can be that perhaps a project like this or a program like this is very IT led. And IT has selected who's going to be involved based on sort of, I guess, maybe their existing relationships and networks. But people from within the business and people who own these processes are not necessarily involved in the right ways as well. So that's where you can get the confusion leading to the other emotions that we see here in the curve. So as we said, I kind of think of this as like the depth of this curve, getting down to that very negative part at anger, and the role is sort of with enabling and managing change is to reduce, I think, the murky depths of this process, but accept that they are likely to happen regardless. But it's just about limiting their impact.
Yeah, we've had a question come through on LinkedIn just around when do you typically see change management as a practice being used within an organization?
I can take that, I think. So in my world, I'm heavily working alongside continuous improvement organizations or departments within organizations, I should say, but also the business process management side of things. So those that are understanding, the real current state of an organization, managing compliance, enablement, and risk around our current processes, and looking forward into the practical reality of updating things for the right reasons. So when I typically see change management as a practice being used in an organization is when is within that kind of continuous improvement or center of excellence group within an organization as well. So when I typically see it, change management as a practice being used, I would hope to say almost being used in an organization, it should be being used every day. It's something as an employee of Nintex for myself, because I've been trained in change management, that I myself can notice when I'm in my own deep change curve, maybe I'm learning some new release or technology to then be able to, see my reaction to that and then reach out for help as well. I think once you've got empowered individuals that can do that, it supports you to not dive deeper and further into that change curve and put your employees at risk is what I would say. What do you think, Barry?
Yeah, I think, In terms of the question, like as a practice, there's obviously different ways that you could say what we're going to try and enable and manage within the organization. Now, if you're embarking on a large program of work and a big change, you would expect there to be a stand up of a much larger sort of, I guess, change management function. If you think about the change curve as you work through that, then as you come out that new stability side, then I think you would expect that sort of dedicated function perhaps to shrink back down. And for then that role to spread then amongst different lines of business within an organization. So different models, you might call that sort of a hybrid model. You might have someone within an organization who does oversee that and does sort of check in on those lines of business, but then you have people within those lines of business who are responsible for making sure that everything is running smoothly in their own areas of expertise. It's interesting, I recently sort of presented around this, and there was a whole lot of pushback to a bunch of leaders, actually, CFOs, CEOs, and there was a whole lot of pushback at the end of the session about, why should I bother with things like a dedicated sort of change management function after I've pushed through my program of work. The thinking that I got there was really they were thinking about kind of the cost and the dollars associated with maintaining that function. But we could certainly say, as I've said, that you could start to then try and disperse that function and embed it into the organization rather than maintaining lots of dedicated people who their role is entirely around change management.
I guess, sorry, I was just going to say, do you see the role as a change management sort of committee or a dedicated, team of people to try and flatten that curve as much as possible within an organization?
Absolutely.
I think,
yeah.
But also take opportunity out of it, right? So people that are within, a denial, anger, exploring, and acceptance, those emotions often are the greatest pieces of feedback in your continuous improvement program of work as well, right? So it's also being aware of them and being productive with what that change impact is to make more, again, data-driven decisions on what you're doing in your improvement programs as well. So I think it can fit in right alongside that. As Barry said, it might disperse, but it might just become more around putting the right kind of tools and strategies in place to collect feedback and troubleshoot it and actually prioritize it as well. Anyway, that's another way to kind of look at the change curve. It's a huge room for opportunity.
That's true. Now, I know we're focused. Sorry, I was just going to say we're focused a lot on the curve and the negative sort of effects of how this all bundles out. But what are, I guess, some of the strategies and tools that can help you get through this and to not have such a deep curve and things along those lines?
Let's jump to that next slide and look at what success can look like as well.
All right, look at that.
Something we prepared earlier. So Barry and I both love this particular slide. One, I mean, it's a really nice way to think about elements of success in a periodic table. So I think for me, the two parts that you need all these components to make a successful project or program of work within an organization work. But strategic direction is something that I'll just talk to from today. Is that strategic direction actually understanding the why and communicating that to others and then coming back to it when we're deep in that change curve, when we're angry or threatened or not sure what's going on, we need to be reminded of that strategic direction. What's the value that we are embracing by taking on whatever change it is? What's that value to, again, the company, the organization, the customer, to me as an individual? What benefits am I going to get out of this? And what am I going to be able to do more of that I love more of on a daily basis? But of course, to drive the elements of success, it takes these other parts and components of the elements of success. Barry, what's your favorite part in here?
Ooh, um, probably the engagement section, actually. Again, it's sort of coming back to some of the human emotion around this, and making sure that people are guided through this process well. Um, so I suppose it is a little bit procedural. So how would I gather metrics, and how would I understand, what the sentiment is around what we're doing? Um, but ultimately, I think it is about managing those range of emotions that people experience as we go through change, and ensuring that we're aligning to our strategies that we have. So we've got some goals for the change that we're putting in place, and understand how we're going to track that we're meeting those goals, and that we're getting the benefits that we experienced. It's just a great slide. As a former chemist, I love this periodic table of success. I think it's great. And the broad high level groups here, and the way that it's broken down, it's just very, very helpful. Obviously, leadership is key here as well. And I will say, the roles that you see there, they are aligned to our product, our process mapping sort of product. But you could take those roles, and you could extrapolate those to have different names, and understand, what their purpose would be within this whole process.
Yeah, I think I so often see in successful projects that they have mapped current state, right? Know what that willed future state is going to somewhat look like when we go for it, and then have got the right capability in place. Projects for me that haven't gone so well, in particular, is where we've lacked in capability. So actually haven't resourced the project, or the drive, the implementation of the project, and the delivery of the project with enough people, or the right skills, or haven't given them enough time to continuously learn on the go to deliver. As we know, with technology and releases that are in this agile world we're in, we do need to be continuously researching, learning, and actually playing to really be successful as well. Yeah, I know we've got about 5 minutes to go. Hey, Dan. So maybe we'll just jump into this last section, because I think it's a really practical way when we look at success. We've got these beautiful elements, but actually, what's the recipe to getting this right? What are the 5 core ways that we can have real, serious, sustainable change? And what if we remove parts of that recipe, those ingredients that make up real serious successful change, if we remove some of those ingredients, what that can do in that change curve to people within the organization as well. Hey, so the 5 ones that you've got there is vision, skills, incentive, resources, and action plan. And obviously, if we take out vision, that's when people get into that confusion state. They're not sure why we're doing this anymore.
They're going to a meeting for the sake of going to a meeting.
Yeah.
100%.
So they need that "what's in it for me" element. And what's in it for me could be, it will be easier to do my job, or it could be that I pick up some new skills as well. But that's where that executive sponsor or champions who are part of this process are able to give that message, and keep people on track as we move through that curve.
Skills, if we remove that, creating anxiety, like I touched on just before, right? So if we don't skill our workforce continuously as we move through any change in an organization, it's going to be really scary. I remember that first lockdown that hit us, and I was running workshops and delivering events live, presenting to clients, literally traveling daily, if not, around New Zealand every second week. And this reality of having to learn to run workshops and deliver events through Zoom, that was the scariest time I think I ever went through. But obviously, great events teams and my team around me to support me meant that I could get through that, because I built the skills over time. Now I'm like, oh my goodness, what's travel.
What do you mean not leave the house?
Yeah, exactly.
No travel is scary. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
the other thing that can sit in that skills element is, and again, if it can be come on from the lack of vision or the lack of leadership, is that IT teams or even lines of business can go out and start buying different tools, and everything doesn't work together. Um, and lack of skills that people have to use a myriad of different tools can be a reason for projects to fail, and for these initiatives like this to fail. So definitely, we need to be mindful that people are armed with the skills that they need, uh, like soft skills as part of this process, but also technical skills as well for any tools that are being introduced into the organization.
And that leads to incentive. Like no one wants to be constantly learning and researching and developing in this day and age. And the truth is, as we know, when change is inevitable, but it's also disruptive, so it's going to be harder. So incentivizing people to actually, work for that, work harder, but incentivizing it as simple as, providing Prezi cards or meeting for lunch once a quarter or something.
Amazon vouchers work wonders.
Exactly. It creates a repetitive good behavior as well, right? So
Yeah,
it has
absolutely.
a real impact. And obviously then drives sustainable change, because we're all working towards a common goal and collective result, which is pretty cool.
It doesn't need to be a financial incentive as well.
No.
It
No.
can be if you identify the people within the organization who you think will enjoy the idea of professional development, and bumping up a level in terms of what they do and how they're seen within the organization, their profile and so on.
Yeah.
That could be the incentive for them. There might be
Mhm.
people
Oh,
we know that
absolutely. Yeah.
are not interested in that at all, but we can certainly identify some people who would like to go up and above what they're doing now and have a bit more of a sort of strategic involvement, I think.
Yeah, and it's always great to add those strategic projects to your resume, for example. Like they're great incentives for some folk.
Yep.
Absolutely. And then resources, just obviously, I mean, how many times, Barry, have you been frustrated in a project because you're the only one driving a particular piece of the project? It's exhausting.
Yeah.
I remember
So
back,
sorry, go ahead, Brie.
I was just going to say back to my 21-year-old self that it was working sometimes like 80-hour weeks, because we were just so under-resourced and had so much to do for a go-live date, right? It was crazy. What was I thinking?
Yeah. And it's important, again, if we are talking about a big bang program, that we understand that people still have their day jobs.
Yeah.
And so we do need to stand up that change management team, which we agree we might disband at the end of that process. But let's not forget about people's business as usual that they still have to deal with.
And I think the last one here, false start. So removing an action plan. I so often, especially in the solution engineer world where we work in pre-sales, right? So we've got these exciting moments where our customers really buy into an exciting adventure with Nintex and this new particular software that they're purchasing. So often though, I watch a delay in actually starting the project from that sale happening. And I think it's down to the fact that the action plan hasn't been actually outlined internally. The resources aren't there. The incentive hasn't been outlined. The vision hasn't even been communicated, but we're purchasing. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's really important for organizations to embrace their own action plans. It's not something that we can drive. We can drive it to a certain extent and support, and our great professional services will obviously enable the delivery, but we need organizations to own their own action plan and milestones. Otherwise, it will take a lot more time to implement real successful projects.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think we've come about time. So thanks very much, guys, for joining me today. This video we put up on the website, so folks can tune in and listen a little bit later on. And until next week, see you later.
Great.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you.